Yeah, so hi, everybody. My name is Chris, and I'm the publisher of a new local media site called Torontoverse. Um, this is the URL, tovrs.ca, or of course, torontoverse.com if you're not into the whole brevity thing. This is what it looks like. And essentially, it's a map with a bunch of, essentially the contents of what would have been an old local newspaper once upon a time in their heyday, put down on top of it and sort of brought to life in real time. The idea is basically to take a local newspaper and reimagine it as essentially a video game. We'll create a real-time view, like an actual live view of the city that you can look at. One of the things that I always talk about is imagining if you were away and you miss the city or something, you tune in and you can watch it, sort of like tune in and get a sense of like being in the city on like a Friday night or something like that, and get a sense of what's going on. And lastly, and this is not okay, it's a little bit of pandering to this audience, but it's not just, I think of this as a platform for civic technology. And when I started this project, I left this slide blank so I can spend some time talking about this. Before I did this, I was a staff engineer at Google working on Ad Manager, which is the part of Google that provides ads for like other parts of the internet, like the New York Times or the Globe and Mail or CBC, or we worked with, pretty much every large publisher uses Google Ad Manager for their advertising. And one of the things that I came to believe, I think everyone thinks the platform for civic technology is the open web. And I think that should be true ultimately. I've built a very complicated website entirely on top of open web technologies. But at the end of the day, to some extent, Google has the open web captive. And what I mean is that if you want to make money the easy way on the open web, which is advertising, right? If you want to build a huge customer base, if you want to be able to participate in a relatively low friction way as a creator, and this is true even for really large creators like the New York Times, you end up having to get your advertising technology from Google. And when users find their way to your website, they get there maybe from Google search, maybe from an alert on their Android phone, and almost certainly using a Chrome web browser. And so when that user arrives on your website, you can try to build your own network, your own advertising, system in the background, but ultimately Google has you at a disadvantage from day one because they know a lot more about your users than you do before they even get to your website. And that's why when people sell ads, and this is what frustrated me when I was at Google, when local newspapers especially sell ads, they end up seeing pretty much all of the upside eaten up by the ad tech in the middle, because ultimately they don't have any leverage, right? They're just another piece of content. And so for me, what's important is envisioning a media future where we're more than that, right? Where we recapture some of the magic that used to exist in local newspapers once upon a time. If you're like me and old enough to remember that, let's say the 90s. And so Torontoverse users interact with their city. This is super important to me, is this like lean forward, click to explore attitude when you're looking around the city. Like for me, when I think about what I want a media site to look like, I want it to be driven by curiosity and exploration, right? Like finding things that are connected to each other and chasing an idea or a thought, or just letting things unwind, but still maybe staying close to the heartbeat of what's happening. And to me, this is what we're trying to capture here, is this sort of lean forward, interactive, click to explore mentality. And that's really important for advertisers, which we'll talk to you about later, or local businesses who want to take advantage of this audience. And I really think that's important for more than just like we need to make money reasons. I think local advertisers are really an important part of the city. Local businesses are a really important part of the city. That interactive where users are exploring is the sort of mindset that lets them go and do something and interact with those advertisers as well. And this is sort of where we talk about the big idea. Most publications, when you create like something to release in like the Globe and Mail, the Toronto Star, or most things, it's like an article, right? It's a bunch of text with some media associated with it. Goes into a content management system. If you're a journalist, you probably work with a bunch of these CMSs. And there's various flavors of them. And for us, this whole idea started by re-envisioning what like the unit of thing that you share on your media site is. Right, in YouTube, it's videos. On the Globe Mail, it's an article in a CMS. It's something different. On Twitter, it's like a little tweet. It's a photo. On Instagram or video now, or a collection of. Right. Ultimately, all of those medias, they're all limited by what you can post on them. That's what sort of defines them. And for us, I wanted to really make that very expansive, right? I wanted us to create something that was like a platform that could be a platform for civic technology on par with the open web. if maybe easier to use, like, made simpler and easier to use. And so we came up with this idea called modules. And a module is basically, it's an article. It could be text, it could be video, but there's also a bunch of code that ties it together. And, for me, personally, I think it's probably likely that content creators need to learn like just a little bit of code, the same way we all had to learn, like, if you were around in the 90s, you had to learn a little bit of Excel to get by, or a little bit of Microsoft Word, because you had to be able to like create a Word document and share it. I think you need to be able to have a little bit of basic fluency with code. And so what I've tried to do here is basically take like the richness of like, the data about the city that we can capture, the stuff that you need to create cool articles, make it accessible using a really simple API that you can use to build things with. And so you can basically take your text, your articles, your YouTube videos and everything, and using like just a little bit of glue code, stitch it all together into a really compelling experience. And that's sort of like the heart of what we're trying to do at Torontoverse, or what I'm trying to do. In fact, like the company is called Geomodulus Limited, like that's the incorporation name of the company. Basically, it's like, these modules stitched into a geography that are actually the essence of the platform. I'm actually going to show at the very end of this in a breakout afterwards. I'm going to use the actual platform APIs and the technology to do like a simple election visualization, sort of show how the election data can be turned into like a simple article. I should be able to get something together, I think, in under 100 lines of code. I think of that as like my magic amount for like, this is really manageable and easy to work with, can be reviewed by somebody simply. So I basically like to create like compelling modules in, about 100 lines of code. Yeah, so what does it look like? Here's a cool example. I actually have, there's a link somewhere that I shared that actually shows this article itself. This is a really cool one, I really like it. It's basically an infographic describing the deep lake water cooling system. This is something that I've always found really incredible about Toronto. It sits right around you. Sort of, I've always known it's there, but I didn't really understand how huge it was, how complex it was, and sort of all the trade-offs involved in building it. So for this article, we were able to basically, illustrate the entire scope of this, explain how it works, and make it so you can sort of like click on all the various parts of the system and see what they are, like what are these buildings, what goes where, why are these things the way they are. And what's great is this was, for our team and budget, this was really easy for us to build. This was, maybe a couple of days of work on the technology side, as well as the thorough reporting by a freelance reporter, Rebecca. But the idea here really is to be able to use technology in a way that really shows people the city around them in a way they haven't seen it before. And to make that easy, right? So that we can keep doing it, we can do lots of it, and we can really sort of have an impact with it. I mentioned this before, and I want to come back to it because I think, we think about advertising as a really not a great thing. So I've worked in advertising for a very long time. I started when I was like 19 selling ads for my campus newspaper in university. So like when I think of advertising, I think of like trading, agate lines for like pizza while my friends like put a newspaper together. But for local businesses, it's a really difficult time to market. Like it's really hard to start a local business. It's really hard to bring in customers. And if you think about like, a local shop that's opened in your area, that's probably like a pot shop or something, because it's really hard to open other local businesses right now. How do they reach you? How do they find you? How do they tell you what they are and entice you to come in? I think it's difficult to do that today. There aren't a lot of places people can reach out. They can go out and they can build Instagram followings, but I'm not Instagram. They won't get me there. They can try to do, various types of content marketing and things like that. But it's really hard for them to find a smart place to spend their money. I shop, I think I mentioned before, I live in Prince Edward County, Ontario. There's a great little town here called Picton. And I love to cook. So I shop a lot at this little kitchen shop called Zest in Picton. And, talking to the people that run the business, they buy Google ads and they buy them, through Google AdWords. And when they place their ads, they end up like next to Walmart for the same thing, listed on the top of Google search results. And they don't feel good about it, but they don't really have many options available. So they're not really sure where to place their ads or how to market their business. And so I think if we talk about what a vibrant local area is, like I want like cool local theaters, like I want great local eateries, I want, innovative, independent local businesses that aren't dependent on some big marketing headquarters in, Toronto or Montreal or New York to try to drive customers in. I guess or San Francisco these days. So I think this is a really important part of making it all work. And so the goal really is basically to use the same tools that we built to create these sort of like compelling pieces of content, and use them to create compelling like experiences for local businesses to basically participate. And the goal is not to charge them to like step into the world. Like we benefit, like this world benefits by having lots of participation from the community. The goal is to basically undercut a lot of businesses that are trying to, I think like put predatory business models on top of these local businesses. That's people like, Uber Eats and DoorDash, and see if we can undercut them in a way that, takes any revenue that is generated from that process and drives it back into the community, creating coverage, paying for content, the things that used to happen with local ad dollars back when local newspapers were still functional. And for an ad professional, there's something like really honest about local advertising. It's sort of like the Broadway of advertising technology, in that like there's a thing like an actor, you're going to go to Broadway, there's nothing to hide. You're on stage in front of an audience every single night. And when you sell local advertising, like local advertisers are spending their actual money. They know exactly how much is in their account. They're running their business. The person who makes the decision you talk to is probably the business owner in a lot of cases. So these businesses need real results. They can't take like a belief in a future result is going to work for them. They're really motivated to find something that works for them today. And so in that sense, they're like a real honest customer base. And even though, we don't like advertising because we're used to the tracking, world that the captive world that Google has us all living in, and sort of everybody copying Google has us all living in. I think if you can create content that's naturally local and put advertising in a local context that makes sense, make it functional, there's a role for it. Believe it or not, in the newspaper days, people still like the advertising in their local newspaper. Like they like knowing what was on sale at the grocery store. Like that was nice. Somewhere along the way, we lost track of that. So, who am I and why am I doing this? I guess that helps. So I got my start, like I mentioned, selling local print ads in my campus newspaper when I was 19 years old. And later, years later, I was eventually the engineering lead at a video ad startup that was acquired by Google. And so I came from sort of the video technology side and ended up embedded in the world of advertising, like basically worked on the same code base that powers, the AdX, the ad exchange that does all of sort of the back end for display ads on the internet. Eventually I won an Emmy for the work that we did there, the stuff that we did in Toronto. So that was pretty cool. And left Google to basically start this company. The reason I'm doing it is I genuinely believe that it's possible to make vibrant working local media. Like I could see the opportunity, but the challenge was that, at Google, there was nothing we could do to make it happen. We needed new formats, right? New local media types that could allow us to do innovative types of advertising. And honestly, if somebody had built those, there was nothing really for Google to offer that was really effective. So I said, okay, great, let's go and do this independently. I also think we need to innovate fast to make this work, because if you look around, I think not only are local media, is it having trouble? Is it drying up, right? Is it actively struggling? I think the communities that it supports are also struggling. Like Toronto's being rebuilt out from under us, as you can see if you walk around. I think a good, strong, vibrant local media is important to make sure that we maintain a sense of place while that transformation is happening. I don't think it's going to stop anytime soon. Yeah, so let's make it happen. And, I think I talked a lot about what we've been doing to date. One of the things I love to do as well is remind people that we're super early in doing this. Like we just launched 6 weeks ago. I think I forgot to mention that. We just went live about 6 weeks ago. So we're really just experimenting, right? We're at the stage where we're trying to figure out how we can make this happen, what the right API to help tell these stories easily is, and really what kind of compelling, cool stories are, we can tell. Like how can we use this technology to really push the envelope? The basic ingredients we have, right? This like database full of data, real-time updates pushed to the front end, a map that we can integrate with, an API that we can use. Maybe I mentioned that already. Like these ingredients can be used to make some really incredible things. So it's really just up to us to take advantage of them and show them living up to their potential. These are some examples. Writing these user accounts to the system so you can like keep track of stuff that you've read and order things and all that sort of fun stuff over time. Another fun one is we're training AI. So we've got real-time updates. The one that we're using to start this off is actually live sports play-by-play. So we've essentially trained a GPT-3 model to take live sports data updates and like basically spit out play-by-play for Raptors games. So we'll be running that one probably in early November for the first time. But I think, as a creator, as a journalist, I think this is a really powerful idea of being able to use AI, combine it with real-time data updates, and then expand the work that you're doing. So, You're creating something and you're writing it up and it exists in a certain world, but then you're able to actually take advantage of AI in a way that I think serves users rather than deceives them. I think that's really cool. I sort of hinted at this one before, but to me, ordering food from inside a module is a super powerful idea, because ultimately it's in my interest not to charge anybody any money beyond like a credit card processing fee for doing that. Because like, you know, the more stuff people can do, the more readers that are going to come, the more valuable this property is going to be, which is so different from the math for like Uber Eats or Skip the Dishes or something like that. You know, they need to charge huge margins because ultimately they need to, like, if you've ever not ordered from one of those apps for a while, you'll realize they start telling you, hey, you know, here's $15 of free food, here's $20 worth of free food, please come back and order. They spend all that money just trying to get people coming into the app in the first place. The cost of customer acquisition, it's really high. For us, the content is the, you know, the content marketing is the cost of the customer acquisition. So we can take advantage of it for all these cool things. And lastly, to me, look, newspapers have always had fun stuff, right? They've always had the funnies and the crosswords and all that. I think like a future version of that, like in an interactive like version of a newspaper, is a really fun idea to think about. So we've been really playing with a lot of ideas for like scavenger hunts and adventure games and that sort of thing. Yeah, so that's what we're working on going forward. I'm actively looking for writers. Tamid is here. He's our contributing editor. He also handles all of our like freelance contacts for writers, and he's got a pitch guide for like the type of stuff that we're looking for people to write about. So you know, to me, we'll talk in the breakout quite a bit, and if there's time in the Q&A maybe. I'm also looking for freelance module developers. So there's lots of freelance writers out there, but I think there's also an opportunity to do like some really cool little nuggets of like freelance code, where you can basically, you know, pay yourself with a writer who's still learning how to do this stuff themselves, and create like a really compelling experience. And of course, I'm always looking for forward-thinking angel investors. You know, one of the things that really I think hurts a lot of media companies is that they end up, you know, getting funding from venture capital, and venture capital needs a certain growth level, and that really ends up, you know, the fundamental economics that you go to market with change over time. So our plan is really to try to run a lean ship. We don't have any outside capital at this point taken on at all. We're looking to take on money in the near term from angel investors who support that mission, right, of trying to invest in building a vibrant, interactive digital community, and making sure that it thrives inside the community first, rather than going for growth. But that said, you know, I have lived in NYC before. I do intend for us to expand and do other versions of this in other cities, or to start new versions of it in other cities. But the plan is to make it work here in Toronto first. And I think that's the end of my prepared remarks.